Hello, welcome back. Today it's all about designing and making your own stuff, and we do a lot of that on this channel. And we're going to be designing a class today. Yes, that's right. We've been doing a lot of classes for Shadowdark, and obviously taking inspiration from older versions of Dungeons and Dragons and 5e, specifically 5e right now, but I actually have been looking at other things as well, particularly when it applies. I have organised a poll for those of you who feel like taking part in the poll. Please feel free. Grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable. This is, I've done my homework, so I've got plenty to prepare and plenty prepared and lots to show you. So let's get going, shall we? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, specifically Shadowdark, and burning down the house, burning down the town, burning anything. It's probably going to happen with some sort of wizard or mage, and we're going to have a go at creating a War Mage class for Shadowdark. There is a War Mage subclass for 5e. War Mages have been a thing that people have wanted to sort of play with quite often. It is not uncommon for people to sort of view this. Even my home group, all power gamers, well, most of them, have definitely requested this, and so this is one of their requests that's on the list that I have. So what I normally do is I ask people how they would go about making a class for Shadowdark, or when we were doing the class stuff for 5e, I would ask you how you would go about doing it yourself, and then I go through the process, show you what I would do, then I have a look at chat and see what they have to say, and we go from there. So let's go with this. So hashtag, how would you design a War Mage class for Shadowdark RPG? So that is my question to you. How would you design a War Mage class for Shadowdark RPG? Alright. So I'm going to show you right now kind of what I've done in advance of this live stream. So you've got an idea of where I've been, what I've been up to. And then I want to explain some of the fairly significant design issues that arise in trying to create a War Mage class. There are some very obvious elephants in the room, and I would definitely like to spell them out, but let's at least have a look at what I have here. So let's change this to draft 9. So not this week, but next week, I'll do another live stream. We'll make another class for Shadowdark, and that will give me 10, and I'm supposed to be meeting Wally DM the day after that live stream. So that means what will happen is we will get together and start compiling the document that will get released on DriveThru RPG. So you won't have to, hopefully by the end of the year it will be well and truly done. But it also requires me to draw some stuff. So yeah, dated October, we're at 2nd of October 2024. All right, there we go. So that is that. And then now if I go down and you'll see War Mage, I can now mark that as I'm working on that now, doing it today. War Mage is going to present a bunch of problems, and this is what I've put down. I put down a wizard trained for war. I guess, let's just put here a magic user. Here we go, magic user trained for war. We can probably link that. Magic user trained for war on the battlefield that wears armor. That's essentially it. And what I did is I took the Shadowdark class, and they only have two things, weapons they can have. They can have a dagger and a staff. I've included the crossbow and the short sword. So I've expanded their ranged attack to something they can use rather than just the throw and dagger. And I've also included a short sword because a short sword is probably the most efficient weapon to use on the battlefield. It is why the Romans used it so much. It is the best weapon Allows you to deal with most problems. Okay, and then armor I've put down special, see below, and you'll see it in a second. I've left their hit points exactly the same as the wizard in Shadowdark, and then I've put in here arcane armor. You can transform leather armor into magical armor that only you can wear, that grants 11 plus your dexterity modifier, which is exactly the same formula as leather armor if you were allowed to wear armor. And magic users, wizards in particular, aren't allowed to wear armor. And the going concept is that they can't actually cast spells in armor because it interferes with them. So you can cast spells while wearing this arcane armor. So what we've simply done is given you really just a +1 to your armor class, as long as you have armor and you create your magical armor. So there's this one feature here that we've put in here, okay, to go with probably the most important aspect of the whole class. Next, I've also put down here spell identification. You can identify a spell that has been cast if you can see the caster. How useful will that be? Possibly not that useful, but the problem is that the wizard has learn languages. Well, I can't put down learn languages because that would be the same as the wizard, and it's not really war mage sort of stuff anyway. And the other one is learn additional spells. Well, that's a wizard thing, not a war mage thing, so why would I put that down? So there's why I've put that in there. It's also what I saw as part of the concept of the war mage in 5e was the idea that they could wear armor and they could identify spells being cast. But mechanically, I'm not entirely sure if this one here will work very well in Shadowdark. It's only in playtesting that I will know for sure if it has any sort of significant use by anybody whatsoever. Anyway, spell casting essentially the same. The only difference is you have a different progression in terms of your table for a war mage. And yeah, you're using wizard spells, but you have a war mage spell table that you work from. I have structured the war mage so that you can get bonuses to your spell casting, bonuses to your melee and ranged attacks if you wind up having to fall back on that, which you may, who knows. Gaining advantage on casting a spell that you know, so one spell that you know. Choose a talent and +2 to distribute to stats. So it's a very simple table, it's not complicated at all. And then we go down into the table itself. Now you'll notice this table is really not a duplication of the wizard spellcasting spell and wizard spells known table, but this is more in line with what the priest gets. Its table is very much like that. Now this table may have to be adjusted. Frankly, it's entirely possible that it may have to be adjusted for a number of different reasons. But I don't know how I can adjust it without it getting a little bit too silly, because I don't want to fall into the trap of basic D&D where you had one spell. Once you used your spell, you couldn't do anything else other than throw a dagger or maybe fire a crossbow. So we've got to be a little bit careful about how this is going to look. I don't know how it's going to look. And then, of course, titles. So this is what I have so far. Does that mean that we're finished today? Absolutely not. There is a lot of stuff to nut out, and I'm going to do that in this live stream. I also want to point out that when I do this sort of thing, I usually have sat down, probably on my bed or on a couch, watching TV or a movie. Quite often it's a movie, and I will have books in front of me, like the 5e books, older AD&D books, Shadowdark books, and I actually write out, I've shown you guys this a few times, this is what I had written down. So there are a few abilities on here and features that I had put down that did not go onto the typed version, which we could do, but there's reasons why I left them out. The first one here is Arcane Deflection, +1 to armed AC magic. Well, essentially we still retain that, it's just tied up in the arcane armor thing, right? But I had also included +1 to stat checks to resist mind and body magical effects, or, to resist magical effects that affect the mind and the body. So I was trying to give you a bonus, not just to armor class, but to other stat checks as well. Now, the only reason I didn't do that is normally what happens with a spellcasting class is you get your spellcasting, right? And then on top of that, you get 2 utility features. For the wizard, it is learn some languages. The other one that they have is you can learn more spells. And you could say, well, that there is a combat feature. And well, no, because some spells are not combat spells. Some spells are actually utility spells. And you as a game master can control what spell scrolls they find that they could try and put into their book in the first place. And the priest has learn languages as well. And turn undead is definitely a combat feature. Absolutely, I totally agree. So I needed to have, if I was going to keep the arcane armor thing, I needed to have something that was not specifically combat-like. And I don't feel like I have solved that problem. I don't think that spell identification is actually kind of where it needs to sit. It might need to look a little bit different. It might even have to look like detect magic. And we attach like a DC so that you kind of, the War Mage doesn't really need to take detect magic because they have that built into their class. That could potentially have a use outside of combat. You could say we cast detect magic in combat sometimes. It doesn't actually happen that often. So I had that feature. I also had another feature on here, which was +1 to initiative rolls. And I took that off because that's clearly a combat feature. And I've already got more than enough of that going on. So I had to take that away. But it was there originally. I had, you can identify a spell being cast if you can see the spellcaster. That was already there. I've kept that. But I am very much open to the idea of simply kind of porting over detect magic into the War Mage and just making it part of, much like the priest casting Turn Undead, because that's part of what they can do all the time, making it like Turn Undead, making detect magic being one of those things. I can see that being more in line with what probably needs to happen, rather than opening up the opportunity to have more spells. That's more wizard, right? So here's the elephant in the room. And this is the problem with creating a War Mage. And it is the problem that I still don't think I have solved. And I am still kind of playing around trying to decide how to get to a point where it's going to work. First problem is, when a player or a person says, I want there to be a War Mage class or a War Mage subclass, what they're really saying to you, whether they want to be honest about that or not, or they're just bullshitting you, that's essentially what they are. They are bullshitting you. They're not being honest with themselves. They're not being honest with you. The problem with the War Mage as a class is this. They want to be a wizard and have the power of a wizard. On top of that, since a wizard is probably the most powerful class in Dungeons and Dragons and in Shadowdark, although I think maybe the priest is probably better. I think overall I feel like the priest is probably better. You might say, but wizards, damage dealing, fireball, lightning bolt, wish, that sort of stuff, much more powerful. Okay, all right, I'll give you that. But I think ultimately, you can get away with not having a wizard in a class and a party in Shadowdark, but you cannot get away with not having a priest or somebody who can cast healing spells. You will be stuffed. You will not make it. Okay, so people want to be the wizard and have the power of the wizard, and they don't really want that to be trimmed down. And then they also want to be a fighter. Now you might be saying, oh, no, I don't want to be the full-blown best fighter there is. A reduction in some way would be nice, is fine with me. Like I could be like a thief wizard, or which's got less armor, or a rogue one, or a ranger type fighter, rather than the highly skilled fighter and so forth. Or, I'm not looking to be full like paladin wizard or anything like that. That's uber. It's bullshit. And I know this. And some of the people in my home group know this. And some of them don't acknowledge it. But I know that this is a problem. So my issue here with making a War Mage is I've got to make a War Mage that is not as powerful as the Wizard in Shadowdark. And it can't be as powerful as the Priest in Shadowdark. That's too much. So how the hell do you do that? Because if I take something away, I've got to add something in. And if I want to add something into it, I have to take something away. So what do I take away? That's the big issue. So I want to explain to you what I did and how I thought about doing this. And then you'll start to see where there are problems with this. Okay? Let's go to chat just very quickly and see if anybody's had anything to say. Nobody said anything. It's very quiet. You're all very... Okay. So let's have a look at the reality of trying to design something like this. One, it cannot be the same as a wizard. It cannot be the same as a priest. And it cannot be the same as a fighter. And it can't be a combination of the two. It has got to be something else in between. So the War Mage has to sort of sit between the power level in Shadowdark, between a fighter and a wizard, and preferably not quite as close to the wizard end as possible, because frankly I think the wizard is probably too powerful. If you've played from level 1 to 10 in Shadowdark, or even other versions of D&D, you'll notice this is the pattern, right? So here is the problem. If I give them a crossbow and a short sword, why am I doing that? Right? If I am expanding their weapon list, why am I doing that? The reason is simple. They are not necessarily going to have an unlimited amount of magic that they can cast. That is the nature of being a War Mage. And if they were going to learn any weapons to compensate for the fact that they may run out of magic, and it's certainly possible in Shadowdark, because if you roll, if you fail a check, you don't get to use it until you take a rest. And if you're using the same mishap table as the wizard, when you have a mishap, and roll a 1, well, guess what? It could be rough. So I have to give them something. If they can't be as powerful and have as many spells as the wizard, there's something that needs to happen and needs to shift. Now, taking away access to certain spells from tier 1 to tier 5, like taking away the tier 5 spells, would just annoy people. Having fewer spells is difficult because there's so few spells that you have access to already that you know in Shadowdark. So how do I compensate for that issue? And the issue is, if they're going to run out of spells, what are the weapons that you would normally use? It is the crossbow. The reason being it would be a crossbow requires very little training. It's about 3 to 4 months worth of training to be effective with a crossbow. So a War Mage could probably take part in that training. It is the type of weapon which is... You can preload it. It's not a great idea, but you can preload it. It does require strength, but actually there's usually a crank on a crossbow, so it doesn't require as much strength as a longbow does, which requires a lot more strength, so that would make no sense. You just won't be strong enough as a War Mage to be able to do longbow shots. Short bow, a little bit different, but there's still a factor in you're dealing with muscle and coordination and aiming and so forth. Crossbow, the reason why everything in terms of warfare shifted from the short bow and the long bow to the crossbow is because you didn't have to worry about people necessarily being incredibly strong, and you didn't need to worry about the huge length of time required to become accurate with it. It is actually still very difficult to fire and hit accurately with a long bow or a short bow. Crossbow, far more accurate, okay? Certainly up to a certain range. So the crossbow would be the one. Now, if you were using a melee weapon, you don't go into war with a staff or a dagger. You will die. But if you're a War Mage and you're in battle, and even if you're in the back line and somebody manages to get through, the weapon of choice is always the short sword. It is why the Roman legions used the short sword so much, and they had the spear, a long spear. So once the spear was expended, it was no longer of use, and the war would get close, that battle would get close, it was down to the short sword. And the technique that you would use is you're obviously going to parry with it and use your shield. We're not going to give them a shield because that would be too much. But you would use the short sword to stab. So those are the two weapons. If you were in a war and you were a war mage, you probably should know how to use. Right? That's why I put them there. So I've given them two weapons that they didn't have before. So now I have to take something away. What do I take away? I've got to take away the number of spells that they can cast. That's essentially it. Which is why the spell list doesn't look like the wizard spell list. That's why they start with 2 spells. And as you might notice, like, they don't go up as high as a wizard's. Like, their top number of spells for level for tier 1, it only goes to 3, not to 4. If you're a level 10, how many spells will you have access to as a war mage? Well, it's 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So you have 13 spells at level 10. You have 2 spells at level 1. But a wizard at level 1 has 3. So you have 1 less. But at level 10, how many spells does a wizard have? They have 4, 8, 12, 14, 16. So they have 3 more spells, plus they can learn additional spells on top of that. So I've had to take it from somewhere. And that's a big take, right? Like, taking away spells and giving them access to a martial weapon that's a big shift. Is it a big enough shift? That's the question. So here's the next step. I have to think about armor, because when people say, let's make a war mage, they are assuming that the war mage will be wearing some sort of armor. They would prefer to be wearing plate armor, but that is absolutely stupid shit, and shouldn't be allowed to happen. The problem too is you can't give them chainmail, because chainmail really is very restrictive, but mechanically and game-wise, it would essentially be down to you get 13 plus your dex modifier, and there's, you would have disadvantage on stealth, but you won't care. You have disadvantage on swim checks and swimming, you won't care in Shadowdark. You wouldn't care less. But if you're getting just a +1 bonus for wearing leather armor that you have made special for you, that's magical, that only you can use, that allows you to cast spells, because you've probably had to make some adjustments to it to fit you in some way. That'll be part of the process, right? That's only a +1 increase, and it means that, because what would essentially happen is, you imagine if you could allow them to have chainmail. Chainmail would be the equivalent of having mage armor. Mage armor as a spell in Shadowdark. So if you're a wizard and you want to have mage armor, you can. But mage armor works a particular way. First of all, it doesn't last all day. Unlike 5e, it actually lasts a very small period of time. So you have a limited time frame to use it. And it works like this. It's a tier 1 spell. It requires you to use your action. So that's a whole turn that you don't get to do anything while you're putting this armor up. An invisible layer of magical force penetrates your vitals. Your armor class becomes 14. Okay, so it's just a standard 14. It would be hard to get a 14 armor class on a wizard. It really is. You're more likely to have like a 10, 11, 12 on your armor class. 14's really, really good. It's 18 on a critical spellcasting check. So if you get a 20 on your spellcasting check, you get 18, which is even better. That's very high. And remember, it's very much more bound Shadowdark. For the spell's duration, how long does the spell last? 10 rounds. Not 8 hours, but 10 rounds. And you might say, well, that's probably at least enough time for 1 combat, maybe 2, if I wanted to use it. Yes, that's true. My experience has been that, though, nobody uses mage armor in Shadowdark as a wizard or a spellcaster. It just doesn't make any sense, in terms of action-wise and so forth, because of its time frame only being 10 rounds. Even if you're using crawling rounds, like it isn't worth the effort. So it's kind of like a ridiculous spell to even have in the game. It's there probably for tradition than anything else in Shadowdark. So that means that if we make it chainmail 13 plus your dex modifier, you're rocking around all the time as a war mage with a 14. That's way too good. That's way too good. That's the sort of thing that a 14 is what a thief might have, if they're lucky, at level 1. So this is why I've built it that way. So what I've decided is giving this +1 bonus to armor class and access to crossbows and short swords is kind of tempering the fact that you're going to get fewer spells that you can cast. 1 less at level 1 and 3 less at level 10. Okay. Is that a big enough reduction? I don't honestly know until we see it play tested. If it play tests and people prefer to play War Mage over Wizard, then I'm almost all the time, and I get words like, this is more powerful than the Wizard, then I know I've made a mistake. Yep. And then we have this feature, which feels very much like it's tied only to combat, and that is a problem. And as I was saying before, it may be the smart way of dealing with this may be to simply tie and detect magic as part of the things that your spellcast can do, because that would make kind of sense, and you could use it outside of combat. So that's why I've been looking at it that way, is like, and that's the big huge elephant in the room, honestly, out of everything else. So I've been talking about this a lot. I've got to make a decision about the spell identifying. I think it's going to wind up being Detect Magic, and I will word it in such a way. And because Detect Magic is a certain tier spell, we will make sure there is a DC check related to that to ensure that it won't always go off. If you have a look at the priest and how the priest works with their turn undead, probably a good structure to use. So turn undead, the turn undead spell, it doesn't count towards your number of spells known. That would be an easy way to sort of tie it in. It's like, okay, you get that spell and that's the only one. That's your key feature. That's probably the easiest way to write it, in fact. Let's just do that. Detect magic. Oops, and I'll just do this. Let's get rid of this because this is probably tied too much to combat. The detect magic spell. It doesn't count toward your number of known spells. There we go. And that might well be the easiest way to build a War Mage, because there is a feature in the subclass for the War Mage, if you have a look at the War Mage in 5e, and there are a couple of things that they have. They have arcane deflection, so we've kind of built this arcane armor. That's sort of to replicate that. They have tactical wit, which I think is kind of stupid. They have power surge. They have durable magic. They have deflecting shroud, all of which I think are either benefits or bonuses to armor class. Saving throws, there aren't saving throws, so that would be stat checks in this case if we were to do that. But we don't think we actually need to make their combat effectiveness any better than they already are, because they got wizard spells, right? And that's just looking at something like the durable magic. Deflecting shroud again is sort of another defensive thing. It's another combat thing. We've got Power Surge, which allows you to... It talks about counterspell. Thank God there's no counterspell on Shadowdark, but it does talk about dispel magic, and it does. And I also kind of feel like it's potentially leaning into tech magic. Tactical Wits, the ability to assess tactical situations, allows you to quickly act quickly in battle. So in other words, it's allowing you to have a bonus to your initiative roll. Again, another combat feature. So we kind of got to lean away from that aspect of it. And since I think the armor aspect of the War Mage is the most important aspect of it, and the fact that you probably have some training in some other weapons outside of the two that you would normally get for a wizard, those are the things that are probably more important to focus on. So that is why I would structure it this way. And I think this would be probably more in line with the wizard and the priest, and it possibly will be enough. It may still be too much, because it is still based structurally on the wizard, and the wizard, as I said, is one of the strongest classes in Shadowdark, just like any D&D game. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with toning that down a little bit. You're late to the party? No problems. So now I have to deal with the worst part of the design process in Shadowdark, and that is coming up with titles, different titles for a War Mage. Probably my least favorite aspect of design-wise for any kind of Shadowdark class is coming up with sufficient number of sodding titles to separate them from everything else. It's not very easy, but we're going to give it a go. And if you have any ideas for, titles for the class, the War Mage, you let me know, and we'll go from there. And I'm going to have a little bit of trouble, I suspect, because I've done so many. This is the 19th class that I've made. For those of you who don't know, down in the description you'll find a link to a document called the Player's Expansion for Shadowdark RPG. It is pay what you want in DriveThru RPG, and it has 10 classes and 17 ancestries. So I've already done 10, and I've done 9 in these live streams, just about. So that's 19 classes, and it's hard to come up with titles after a while. It really is. It's not very easy at all. So let's go down and see if we can knock that out. I think what we'll do is we'll start off with words that are as close to what we want as possible without duplicating stuff that has already been done before. I don't know how easy that's going to be. So I'm going to put here War Mage, and I'll put here Theosaurus. Something like that. The dinosaur name. Okay. So Battle Mage, Field Mage, Spell Sword. I am open to the idea of using Spell Sword. The problem with the word Spell Sword is we have another class coming up in the future that will be called Blade Singer, and I'm probably going to wind up having to use Spell Sword and Spell Blade as titles for that, which is a pain. Frankly, I would prefer not to have to sort of contend with the fact that, and of course, Blade Singer feels very similar to War Mage, doesn't it? So it's got to have a different focus. And those two names would be perfect in terms of titles for that. But they could also be used for War Mage, which is a pain. And then Spell Blade, Spell Sword. What we can probably definitely use is Warcaster. I feel like the word Warcaster is good. It definitely seems like it's fitting. I don't think we have Warcaster necessarily as a title already. So let's go here with Warcaster. And is it going to be chaotic? I don't know. Warcaster. Okay. Warlock. I don't feel like there's already Warlock used in the titles for Wizard, and we've already got a class called the Warlock, so forget about that. Enchanter. I suppose we could say that they are an enchanter, but I don't think so. Magician. I'm open to the idea of using Magician, for sure. Magician feels much more like, well, it hasn't been used as far as I can tell. I think the only problem is Magician may be something I've used in other classes that I've built in the past. But we'll go with Magician and paste it. Magician. Okay, so we've got those. There's two. Field Mage. I don't want to put down Field Mage because it's two words and I don't feel like it flows very well together, so let's leave that alone. I don't want to call them a wizard. I don't want to call them a sorcerer because, unfortunately, again, we have a class that's called sorcerer, so I don't think they're really a sorcerer. We could call him a conjurer, but wizard's already got that as a title, so we can't do that. Thaumaturgy. Mangus. Mangus is a potential name. I may have already used it. Arcanist, that is potentially a name that we could use. Arcanist. So let's go here with Arcanist. What else do we have here? Mangus. And we'll go over here, Mangus. Mangus. There we go, Mangus. I may have already used it in something else, so that's the only problem. Witch and Warlock are already titles in the Wizard, so we just can't use them. I don't think I've used this name, Thaumaturgy. Thaumaturgy. I don't know that I've used that. I'm not sure that I'm a huge fan of that as an option. Thaumaturgy. Define. Meaning, a worker of wonders and performer of miracles, a magician. That's essentially its meaning. Okay. Not really surprised by that. The word comes from the ancient Greek thaumaturgos, meaning wonder working, and it was first used in England. So maybe one of the ways we can solve this problem is to look for the word mage in different languages, and maybe that will help us give us what we need. I'm not entirely sure that'll necessarily work, but that could be a way to go, to try to find enough different titles for it. So that's what that's called. So okay, so let's drop it in for now. I haven't really sort of thought too much about it other than that. And then going down occultist, I think shaman. I already have a class called a shaman. Diviner, seer, it's a fortune teller, prosper. It's not really quite the same thing. Necromancer, death magic. I don't know that a war mage is really a necromancer. Are they potentially a necromancer? I suppose we could say necromancer for the chaotic side of things. So that maybe if we put that here as necromancer, a war mage necromancer. Let's do that for now. And then going down, war mages, okay, demons, personal, blah blah blah. Battle mage, I can see battle mage being a name we could get away with. Battle mage is definitely on the cards. So warcaster, battle mage. We could even transpose battle mage over as the class name rather than war mage if we really wanted to. It's essentially the same sort of thing if you ask me. And then what else do we have here? Aggressive mage, military witch, warrior sorcerer, spellblade, eternal warrior. And okay, so none of those are sort of working. for me. So let's go back and let's go here with mage. So we had War Mage, but then there's other things we could put here. We could put here Battle Mage, and maybe we'd get something else. Battle Mage doesn't give us anything extra. Okay, all right. War Mage, spell Gish. Well, actually, Gish is not a bad idea. Gish. A Gish has several meanings, most commonly referred to as a character in fantasy role-play games skilled in both physical combat and magic. A larger scavenger hunt competition called Gish. Let's use Gish as one of the titles. Gish. Okay, all right. I think that works. Sorry, people. Going down. Arcane Knight. I don't really want to use Arcane Knight. Try to stick to one word if we can. Martial Mage, A lot of this is not going to help us in the slightest. Okay, let's go back to chat and see what people have in terms of ideas. Because I think we're going to have to just break it down to Mage and Theosaurus very shortly, and that's going to give us a lot of stuff we've already got as well, which is kind of a bit of a pain, but you never know. Maybe we'll get lucky. Okay, what have we got here? No ideas. I'm on my own today. Okay, all right. Let's, I guess I'll just knuckle down and make it happen. Wasn't expecting that. Where am I? I'm in the right place? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong screen. So you're probably going to get a weird thing going on. All right, so, well, let's use Gish. Gish Theosaurus may be a solution. That's that might be giving me a bit more Gish. No. Templar. What else? We've got Zealot. Don't think that it's too broad a concept, that one. Warrior Mage, Spellblade, Mage Knight, Battle Mage, Jabber, Run. None of those sort of work. Zealots, Gish Slang, an Outsider. Okay. Is Gish a word? Oh, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. Skilled in both combat and the use of magic. Gish. What is a Joskin? No, I'm kind of curious. What is that? Is this part of what we're looking for? A clown yokel? No, it's not what we're after. Okay, so we need to be able to combine a couple of words together to get something that's close to what we're after. Gish isn't doing it for us. What's another word that we could use that sort of is in the same vein? Magic user, Theosaurus. All right, magician, wizard, sorcerer, mage, witch. Okay, so all of these we've kind of been there before. Magician, mage, general, spellcaster, enchanter, dark magic, sorcerer, and witch. Okay, spellbinder. I feel like we could potentially get away with spellbinder. That seems like a reasonable one to go with. Spellbinder. Might even fit better with something else, wouldn't it? Potentially. But let's take Spellbinder. Let's try Spellbinder there. And we need something else that will sort of fit in amongst these without duplicating what has already been done before. Not so easy to do. Can't go Sage, can't go Shaman, can't go Seer. Already got those there. Diabolicus, just not going to work. What about Spellweaver? Maybe that'll work. Spellweaver feels like it's... Go cut. It's probably going to belong more over here, isn't it? And then... Mystic. We can probably get away with Mystic. Mystic, I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4. We had Spellweaver. We got, I guess we could also look at the word battle, because we can use magic and spell in conjunction with battle quite a few times. The word war might give us some solutions. Strife, hostile, conflict, combat. None of those. Warfare. Not going to work very well in terms of anything. Aggression, feudal. Okay, okay. None of those are going to work. Okay, let's try over here. I'll try this. So War Mage in different languages. Give me that. What do we got? French. Mage de guerre. Okay. German. Kriegsmoor. Okay. A mango. Feels like a fruit. So there is a few. German, French, Spanish, Italian. Enchantress, Enchanteur, Archmage already exists, so we can't use that. How do you say war in other languages? I suppose a Greek word for mage. What is the Greek word for mage? Magician. Okay. What is the name, ancient name of mage? Mangus, which we already have. Okay. How do you say magic in different languages? That's a good question. I will struggle with a lot of this. Okay, so it's too close to home. They're not different enough. So we're going to have to... I'm really going to struggle with this one. I'm not going to stay on this for too long because I need to be able to move along and get other things done, and so do you. What's another way that we could sort of look at this? So War Mage. Combined 2 words to mean War Mage. Okay. Angus Wool, I think similar. Charmer, Prophesizer, Exerciser, Foreseer. I can't use Hexer because I'm pretty sure I use that for the Warlock. This just, yeah, this is part of the problem, people. It's like there's a limit to what you can get away with after a while. Angus, Magician, Voodooist, Diviner, Prophet, Fortune Teller, Crystal Gazer. None of these seem very good. These all look pretty kind of shite. I guess what's another way? Spellblade, Spell Sword. Maybe I just have to use those titles anyway, just to get myself over the top. Because right now it doesn't feel like I'm going to be able to get it over the top. Let's go here and cut this. Put that there. Let's cut that. Put that there. And Arcanist. Let's go with something else, I guess. It needs to be about battle and war. If we can get the word war or battle in there, we're kind of in the right place, right? Battle, war, combat. And almost all titles tend to be in Shadowdark one word, which is like a very, very difficult thing to do. Even if you combine things. Yeah, I'm going to really struggle with Warcaster. Got Battle Mage. Okay, I'm going to come back to this in a second. Let's see if I can solve this problem another way. And right now, I'm not solving it in this live stream. So, here's our basic structure for our class. I feel like it is different enough that it isn't just a wizard. It has got some non-combat stuff, even though it's using magic and detect magic, and it's got armor. And it's got access to weapons, unlike the wizard didn't really have. So it's got a lot going for it. I think it's still got enough spells that it can be useful. I haven't trimmed it back so much. I'm really reluctant to give it just one spell at level 1. Even with detect magic, you could say, okay, well, yeah, but it would be alright to have, and maybe it would be, to have one spell that they can cast as well as the detect magic that isn't part of its spell casting repertoire. That would be fine. So they get detect magic and one other at level 1. And then of course then they rely on their crossbow and other things. I'm just not convinced that it needs to be that tied back. Not yet anyway. I won't know until we see people playing with it, honestly. Oh, here we go. Shy X and Fred Huber. You guys you've actually come to my aid. this may actually be where I can fill in those missing bits and pieces. Spell Grenader, Tactician, Charlatan, interesting. What is charlatan? If I take the word charlatan and I use that, because doesn't charlatan mean something else? Charlatan is a person who falsely claims to have skills, knowledge, or expertise that they don't possess. I don't think that this feels more like the thief, roguey stuff. So maybe not that one. Cosonier. Fred Hoover's got Cosonier. What is that? I am very curious. Am I even pronouncing it correctly? I have no idea. It looks like it's from some part of the world. Cosonier. Cosonier meaning in English, in Hindu. Oh, okay. Yes. Tell me. A person who cheats, tricks, or deceives others through dishonest means, often using clever or artful deceit to gain something useful of value. Cosonier. Possibly. Let's keep going through the list. Mountebank. I don't know. Does Mountebank make any sense? Joker, Jester. Now we're going to... I think somebody had written down here Iconoclast and War Witch. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in Battle Blaster. Is Battle Blaster even one word? I don't know. Is it? No, it's two words. So we could go, how could we do this? Okay, let's Werebeast, Smokescreen, Ritualist, Ritual, Enchantress, Tactician. It's in a fantasy game. It can be one word if you want it to be. Can it? Yes. Yeah. Well, yes. I was thinking that. Fuck it. Let's do that. Let's make that a little bit easier for us. Battle Blaster. Let's do that. And somebody had mentioned something about Tactician and Ritualist. Let's do Ritualist. Arcanist, Mage. Arcanist. Let's go here. I don't even know if I've got the right one for this. I feel like Arcanist is something I've already got on the list of things that... Yeah, Arcanist already exists, so... What? It was there. It was on the tip of my tongue. I was about to put it down, and I lost it. Why did I lose it? Ritualist. Let's do that. 3 more. I'll sod it. I know. Let's just get silly. Doomcaster. I don't know what else to say, other than run out of ideas. Doomcaster, Necromancer, and then what else did you guys have here amongst these ideas? I don't know. Gosh. I don't know that it really matters. I'll figure it out at some point. I'll probably go through and I'll have a look at it and I'll have to remove stuff and like, oh no. I've already used that idea. Can't use that again, and it's another title. Jesus, titles. My players like titles. I know Kelsey likes titles, but designing titles for classes is the pits. It really is. Absolutely the pits. So yes, I've added in Doomcaster. I put in the Battle Blaster. I've moved Spellweaver around and so forth. Like, yeah, so I've moved some stuff around, added some stuff in. The last two, I'm hoping that I'll go to the toilet and have a big poo and an idea will pop out, or something will. Anyway, yeah. Right now, I'm tempted just to write in Shit Blaster in both of those spaces and be done with it. But since that's not really very helpful to you guys, or really in my case, since I've got to at least have it sorted, I won't do that. Okay, so War Mage. I think the gist and the basics around the War Mage are there. I generally feel like it's probably not made it so powerful that it will be an option that people would prefer over taking the likes of a priest or a wizard, and they are the strongest classes there are. But it does offer you a little bit more versatility. You could potentially do a bit of frontline fighting if you absolutely had to, although you don't need to. You could just shoot stuff with a crossbow from a distance. If you wanted to, particularly if you wind up losing access to two spells, like two spells at tier 1 that you would take as a wizard. What would they wind up being? Probably Magic Missile, which you're not going to lose because you have advantage on spellcasting check, so that's not going to be going anywhere anytime fast. I mean, that's probably the most obvious selection out of all of them. And then if you're having another tier 1 spell, you wouldn't be taking Detect Magic because you already got it. You'd probably take, I don't think you would need, maybe you'd take Light. I mean, I suppose you could. Light is a very popular one in Shadowdark, just in case you don't have enough torches. People like Light, particularly if they're dealing with places where the light might be put out. It's very hard to put out a magic light, whereas a torch you can blow out or get wet and stuff like that. I guess maybe Burning Hands, or I suppose it does give you still a little bit more, a few more options, but not just restrict you to one spell that you can cast. Although giving you built-in Detect Magic does mean that you're probably going to have Detect Magic and one other spell, so you essentially do have two spells. Yeah, okay. I think I'm where I need to be with this design here so far. I'm not convinced that it's at a finished state. I'm not at all. And I can see there potentially being a whole bunch of problems that will occur once we start mucking around with it. And trying to figure out whether it's going to be too good an option. It's really hard to know until you see it played at the table. And it also depends on who's playing it too. Like, not only do I need to have somebody who's very familiar with Shadowdark, but also knows all 4 classes back to front, and is also quite bright, like not stupid, and understands how to play Dungeons and Dragons and how to use the classes. Shield Maiden, Iron Maiden, I like that. Solarplex, Infestation. Solarplex is it's a part of the body. I feel like we're going into wrestling. I'm not building a wrestling class. I refuse. I'm going to end this poll. So, yes, what am I doing next week? Famine? Yeah. So, next week, so we've already done the Swashbuckler. We've done the Monster Slayer. We've done the Gloomstalker, which I feel like the Monster Slayer and the Gloomstalker are so similar in nature. Today we did the War Mage, and I feel like we did kind of make some compromises and get to a point where it feels like it's doing something other than just whatever. So I feel like that's at a reasonable point in terms of its development. And then, so next week would be, well, I've done the Hexblade, I've done this, done that, none of those. Okay, so here we go. It's got to probably wind up being the Blade Singer, which means, I hate to say it, the Blade Singer is going to run into something similar in terms of problems, just like this class did, since it is probably going to be using magic and not having quite as many spells as a wizard. So the Blade Singer and how it operates. And then there's another one which is going to be the Soul Knife, which is, I would say, a half caster in many respects, whereas a Blade Singer is kind of more like a full caster. Soul Knife, no, we'll do the Blade Singer, and it'll give me an opportunity to really lose my mind, frankly. And then the following week I'll do the Soul Knife, and then we're off to Fred's design studio, and well, we're here already. So you got 2 weeks of that. Hopefully, I get to one with Wally. We pull the material together. I eventually get some artwork for the cover, and we get that onto DriveThru RPG for you to play test and try out and see what you think. So after that, we're going to be looking. Look. Before I die, I would like to think that I could have a go at trying to fix 5e. And that's what I would like to do, probably in about 3 weeks' time. I would like to try to fix modern D&D before I'm gone. I don't know if I can. I know everybody under the sun is trying to, and I would like to put my hand into the pool and see if I can do any better. And I don't know if I can. But I have some new ideas and new approaches which will pretty fundamentally change a lot of stuff, but still keep the D&D class system. And that's sort of where my head is at. And obviously I'll come back to Shadowdark, but I do want to look at trying to deal with modern D&D, since I feel like it is sadly lacking in design development that is not lost in the weeds. and rather than talking about what I don't like, I'm just going to show you how I would go about fixing it. I think that is a much more constructive approach. That is why I'm showing you how I would go about making classes. Yes, I expect a lot of people to either love or hate me if I start talking about fixing 5e. It is a great, huge bonfire of a mess, absolutely. But I would also like to point out, even though this is my favourite game, I do actually think that there are problems with Shadowdark in terms of the classes, because the priest and the wizard are still probably the strongest classes in the game, particularly at high level, not at lower levels, particularly at high levels though. That problem still permeates the game. And maybe it's something that will always be there and you can't actually fix that. Maybe we're trying to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, I've had this discussion a lot. Yeah, Jason, 5e has a lot of issues Absolutely. So Jason Pierce, you're so right. And so I have some sort of little discussion points about some of the design material or design structures they use in modern D&D 5e, and how maybe we need to rethink them completely, because they're often carryovers, and they've been carried over from older versions of D&D to modern D&D, and then kind of expanded and gotten worse, and they sometimes even permeate Shadowdark, I've discovered. Like we've found, for example, in Shadowdark, Fireball is way too powerful. 4d6 as a spell is way too much, particularly when a monster that's level 10 has probably got 45 hit points. Like the numbers are different. You don't need to have Fireball doing as much damage as that. So yeah, we're going to be doing a lot more design work around 5e, and I also want to try to fix up those species. And I did something on backgrounds, but I would also like to do. I can't fix the core rules, by the way, Jason. Yeah, Jason, I totally get what you're saying. I can't fix the core rules without completely rebuilding that game system. But what I can do is I can deal with classes, species or races, and backgrounds. And if you attack that first, I think a lot of the problems of the core rules will actually fade away into the background. Anyway, so that is what's happening. I'm going to get out of here. I'm talking about stuff that you're not even seeing. So War Mage, do you need to actually have it in your game? Not necessarily. People have said here, does Shadowdark RPG need a War Mage class? Yes, 50%. Undecided, 33%. No, 17%. 6 votes. And I would honestly say I honestly don't think that Shadowdark needs a War Mage, unless I can figure out how to build it in such a way that it is sitting between the wizard and the fighter. If I can't figure out how to do that, it's probably a waste of space. No, I totally understand it. We're going to have a lot more discussions around some of the issues around modern D&D game mechanics. In 3 weeks, you're going to get bombarded by it. But rather than it turning into a great, huge piss fest, which is not fun, I would like to at least provide or suggest solutions that other people have not suggested. I've been watching what other people have been talking about, and I think they're on the wrong track. But anyway, War Mage Class. I will put this up onto Patreon paid tier when I am satisfied and have figured out what these last titles will be, or if I need to change any of this, which right now I feel like it's relatively solid. But again, it's not play tested, so I won't know until I've done that. Anyway, let's get out of here so you can get on with your day. You've got other things to do. I've got to get some stuff done. Yeah, we'll be back next week. Do it all over again. Anyway, huge thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. Thank you for taking part in the poll. If you took part in the poll, I do appreciate it. Thank you to Jason Pierce for weighing in and putting forward some of his ideas or comments. Fred Huber and Shy X, thank you for trying to help me with the titles. I do appreciate it. And it's going to be an interesting process. The more classes you make, the harder it gets. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.